Welcome to Mana's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 13, The Paladin of the Holy Kingdom. The air of the battlefield had a unique smell to it. It was a muddled mess of all kinds of odors, and simply put, it was a revolting stench. Still, it was a stench that one could get used to. One of the people behind the closed portcullis Remedios took several deep breaths of that stinking air. Her eyes were fixed on the advancing force before her, which numbered over 10,000. The leaders of the assault on this location were ogres and horse-like demi-humans. Remedios gripped her holy sword tightly. She liked using the sword to settle matters. She loved it. It clearly defined winners and losers. After all, there would be no more trouble after you killed the opposition. Life would have been so much easier if things were all so simple. Her sister Callard and her master Kalka would no longer knit their brows. Ha! She sighed. After that, Remedios thought about what she had to do. Gustav had said a lot of hard-to-understand things just now, but the gist of it was that they could not let a single demi-human pass this gate. The demi-humans numbered in the tens of thousands. Around 10,000 of them were bearing down on the gate. Not letting a single one pass would be impossible if we were fighting on the plains, but here I can use the gate to limit the numbers who can attack me. So as long as I can keep fighting, it'll be easy enough to keep them from getting past. I just need to keep drinking fatigue recovery potions and keep fighting them one-on-one. If Gustav were here and had heard this, the look on his face would probably say, "Are you serious?" And as she calmly considered that mental image, Remedios laughed. Still, the idea was quite ridiculous, and it was no wonder he would often grab his head in frustration. See how perfect my plan is. Kalka Sama said I could delegate command to someone else, and Caspin Sama seems like an excellent person. Yumu, Remedios nodded. After that, Remedios thought about the only flaw in her plan to fight one-on-one 10,000 times. That was the existence of Jaldabaoth. Remedios' plan broke down when it encountered someone stronger than her. She had trouble using her brain for the most part, but her mind was quite adept when it came to war. That was why she understood that it would be very difficult for her to defeat Jaldabaoth. Of course, she could not admit that in front of her subordinates. She was the strongest paladin in the Holy Kingdom, and if she admitted her weakness, morale would probably plunge to rock bottom. That was why they had brought the Sorcerer King over. The Sorcerer King, huh? The fact that they had to entrust one of the undead with the fate of the nation upset her so much that she wanted to throw up. However, they had no other option. Tis. If only that undead creature had fared in a sneaky way, like using those goats or sheep which killed all those kingdom troops. That way, no innocents would have to be sacrificed. Don't the undead understand that people with strength have to protect the weak? Still, he's really strong, isn't he? Taking a city by oneself was an impressive feat. Busser was a famous demi-human according to Gustav, and defeating him was also quite outstanding. However, Jaldabaoth was a different matter altogether. She had her doubts as to whether even a magic caster who could conquer a city without assistance could actually defeat him. Perhaps she would have learned the truth if she could have crossed blades with him just once, but Gustav had desperately pleaded with her not to. Therefore, she did not know exactly how strong the Sorcerer King was. Remedios remained dubious of the Sorcerer King's strength. She had personally experienced Jaldabaoth's might when he had revealed his true nature, but she could not sense anything like that from the Sorcerer King. If he was truly able to crush the kingdom's army, then he ought to be surrounded in an aura of power that could not be hidden. Was that because he was a magic caster? However, if he was on Jaldabaoth's level, she ought to have been able to sense something from him. It would be good if he was really as strong as he claimed. Well, we won't lose much if he dies. That undead creature will be a thorn in the Holy Kingdom's side in the future. Ideally, the two of them would kill each other. Remedios' opinion had not changed even after her subordinates protested it. No, it had only solidified after the Sorcerer King killed the boy who had been taken hostage. As a paladin, she could not tolerate anyone who could calmly commit such inhuman acts. The people of that country were actually ruled by fear, right? When she thought about it, she found a lot of points which pointed to that conclusion. Perhaps having him and Jaldabaoth kill each other would be for their good too. The problem is the people of our nation. Gustav was right when he said that this was a chance for us. We paladins can show our strength and abandon the Sorcerer King's foolish opinions. Still, if Jaldabaoth shows up, we have to let him handle it. Remedios took off her helmet. She wanted to scratch her head. It was hard to imagine that the citizens of a country run by an amazing individual such as Kalka would tolerate one of the undead like that. Just thinking about the matter should have revolted them. Square Baraja also. Could it be that she's been charmed by a spell or something? Yes. He might be using some spell with a wide area of effect that forces people to like him. Damn it. Remedios thought. She had not considered that possibility. I should tell Gustav about this. That said, it'll have to wait until we win this battle. Remedios looked behind her. There stood neat ranks of civilians holding spears and shields. Brave gentlemen. Regretfully, the Holy Kingdom is currently being trampled by demi-humans, but you must accept it. Defeat the demi-humans and save the innocent civilians, your friends and family, from their suffering. This is the first step towards our goal, which is to drive out these bastards here, and take the Holy Kingdom back with our own hands. As Remedios shouted imposingly, anxious looks filled the faces of the militiamen. The filthy demi-humans are attacking this place. Gentlemen, raise your shields and thrust your spears. Become a wall that will not let the enemy past you. There's no need to be afraid. Other than their first wave, the only demi-humans you will have to deal with are the demi-humans fleeing from me. All you need to do is hold them for a while, so that the paladins and I can take them down. That eased their tension a little. While being too relaxed was not a good thing, being too tense was even worse. Remedios mused that all the militiamen she could see were in an ideal frame of mind. You lot were trained all day yesterday. All you need to do now is show the fruits of that training. No need to be so tense. Remedios paused for a moment, and then shouted louder than before. First rank. Shields up. The first row of the militiamen, who looked like they were encircling the gate, braced their shields. These were great shields which could completely conceal a human body, and their bottoms were lined with spikes that were the length of a finger. Shields. Dig in. The shield-wielding civilians slammed the spike portions down with all their might. Thus, they produced a wall of steel in moments. Yesterday, these shield-bearers had vigorously practiced 3 drills. The first was to raise their great shields into the air and slam them back down, in order to drive the spikes deep into the ground. The second was not to falter, regardless of the pressure they were under. Second rank. Shields up. While the shields they carried were roughly the same size as those of the first rank, theirs did not have spikes. Those shields would go over the heads of the first and the second ranks, like a lid on top of them. This way, they would protect against attacks which made it past the first rank. There were also paladins who could cast under Divine Flag, spaced evenly through the second rank, to protect them from the fear of being pushed by the enemy. Third rank spearmen, advance. Fourth rank spearmen, advance. The third and fourth ranks were composed of long spear users. Their long spears would protrude from between the shield teams, their butts firmly planted in the ground to stop the enemy's advance. The third rank and the fourth rank spears were slightly different from each other, in that the fourth ranks were slightly longer. Normally they ought to have had several more ranks of spearmen to form a spear wall, but since they were lacking in numbers, their aim was to overlap killing zones to prevent the enemy from breaking through. It was a perfect formation. However, it had a flaw. While this formation did very well against warriors, it was very weak against demi-humans with special abilities or magic casters. It was true that the shield wall could block spells like Fireball, and greatly minimize the damage done. However, spells like Lightning that had a piercing, line-shaped area of effect would pierce straight through the men out the rear. One could not say that demi-humans did not have similar special abilities. They knew this, but they had taught them to take that formation anyway, because no other formation was effective in these circumstances. Very good. Then let's begin. Open the gate. The portcullis began to rise as Remedios shouted. The advancing demi-humans were shaken, and their movements slowed down. The defenders were opening the gate of their own accord. Optimists might think it was a surrender, but realists would consider it a trap. Remedios laughed. You filthy demi-humans. I'll skin you and wipe my ass with your hides. After being taunted by a feeble human, the frustrated demi-humans broke into a charge. Remedios turned and ran. She planted both hands on the militiamen's shields and vaulted over them. The demi-humans continued their charge, several of them falling down as they approached the gate. Large quantities of oil had been poured there, and only 2 outcomes awaited those who fell during the charge. Either they would pull down those behind them, or they would be trampled flat instead. Unfortunately, the big-framed demi-humans like the ogres did not fall, and they made it into the city. The horse-like demi-humans slipped and fell, which slowed them down. A large demi-human's charge ought to be on par with a collision from a warhorse. However, if they could not follow through with it, then all bets were off. The ogres continued charging even though their pacing was messed up. They swung their large mauls back and forth, but the spears were longer in comparison, and they impaled several ogres who had failed to properly judge the distance. Unfortunately, the ogres were not fragile enough to be killed by that. Now, throw them. In accordance with Remedios' instructions, firebombs flew over the heads of the militiamen, and the sounds of potters smashing could be heard near the gate as an inferno sprang up. The demi-humans around the gate were surrounded by a great fire. The demi-humans should have predicted something like this, but Remedios was certain that the fires were far beyond what they had expected. That was because both the oil on the ground and the oil on their bodies had ignited at once. The ogres facing the shield bearers began to falter. It was only to be expected, considering there was a blazing fire behind them. While they had thicker skin than a human being, that did not mean they could not be burned. Wails and cries rose from the vicinity of the gate. However, not many of them had lost the capacity to fight, despite being enveloped by a fire of that intensity. One had to acknowledge the great vitality of demi-humans. Those demi-humans only had two options. They could advance or retreat. Black smoke blocked their lines of sight. Thus, they were robbed of all other options. While many demi-humans could see in the dark, that ability did not allow them to see through smoke. Nobody could act calmly while they could not see, were in anguish from the smoke, and when they were being burned by the flames. Retreating was very difficult given the circumstances. That was because others were following closely behind them in order to storm the city. In fact, the demi-humans outside the gate were hesitating due to the fire, but the ones inside could not know that, given that smoke obscured everything. Therefore, the demi-humans chose to advance. That was exactly as Remedios had predicted. The demi-humans attempted an assault, banking on their powerful bodies to carry the day. However, the shield bearers' third role consisted of maintaining their shield wall, even when surrounded by billowing black smoke. Spearmen. Pull. The spears retreated as one. Spearmen. Thrust. And they thrust out in unison. The demi-humans gave voice to savage howls, thinking only of getting out of the smoke, and it was under these circumstances where defense and evasion were very difficult that they ran into the spear line. However, a commoner's strength would be hard-pressed to impale a demi-human's body. This was particularly true of the hand-picked demi-humans who were intended to break through the gate in a frontal assault. However, that was no problem. Remedios did not think that they would go down in a single attack. As long as the shield bearers were in place, the spearmen could attack over and over again. Pull, thrust. As she repeated the order, Remedios jumped over the shields in the opposite of her previous actions, and cut down the demi-humans where the spears could not reach.